Multimedia J Radio style.
Well, folks, it is late, I'm tired, and I'm recording a follow-up segment to the last discussion about WoW Classic, and I'm technically doing things wrong here because I'm actually recording this but tying it back to the September 1st discussion about WoW Classic, because I want this to be a follow-up. I don't think it really has the oomph to really lead off the next discussion on whatever I want to talk about next when it comes to podcasting. We're just going to talk a bit about what's formally referred to as demographics, but you might know it better if you don't know the formal term as good people, bad people, and stuff related to guilds in MMOs in general. Our screenshot for this discussion is an old Lich King screenshot of my guy in the Crusaders Coliseum from back in the heydays of Trial of the Crusader and whatnot. And I'm mentioning Lich King specifically because what this situation that I just went through reminded me of one of the worst guilds that I had in Lich King. So where do we begin? Shortly after I got into Classic, I ran into somebody from the guild that I was in on Drama Straza, of all places. He hadn't been into the game for years, and like many other people out there that Blizzard's trying to get to come back through the Classic service, he came back for Classic. And there were some other former guild mates and whatnot, and they were like, "Hey, how you been? Let's do stuff together." And it was a big reunion. It was pretty cool and all. Definitely drove my desire to progress through the levels in Classic, although the average level on the most common level, I should say, on my Classic server is now getting up to around 20 among most of the players on there. There are some people that are tearing ahead of everybody else, but for the most part, people are basically going through the 20s and whatnot in the mainstream. So it's going to be a slow march to 60 because, of course, Classic was slower than the current version of the game. So it was a happy reunion for a bit, although these guys, they all play later at night than I do. I have to go back to day shift by the beginning of next week. So I'm actually trying to get to bed earlier and earlier this week, and there's going to be things I'm going to be doing to make that happen by force if need be, with like trying to get through a day on only 5 hours of sleep or something. So it won't be fun, but it's got to be done. So if I hadn't been in this situation, I would be doing more with these folks, but it looks like they're going to end up on a later schedule than me anyways. But I did join the same guild that they joined after they had a guild with only 3 people in it, and then they decided they didn't want to actually try and build the thing up as other guilds are building up on the server, and it's getting to the point where it's rather hard to recruit people. So I joined the same guild as them, and they find out the hard way just how much I don't tolerate being pushed around in MMOs anymore. So I've been talking about in these podcasts how the toxicity that existed in vanilla is going to be even worse in Classic because Blizzard has handed the people who want to be hateful some ammunition. So there is all kinds of hatred towards retail, to the extent that you have to wonder if some of these people playing Classic are only there out of sheer hatred for retail, and they're not actually having any fun. They're just there to stick it to retail, and they're that vengeful in terms of their attitudes. To Blizzard, I know it doesn't matter. They pay their $15 a month just like anybody else. But I don't want to deal with that drama. I dealt with enough of that crap on Drama Straza back in the day. A server which had too much drama and not enough progression. And what do you know? It seems like those two always go together. No matter what server I've rolled my various alts on over the years, it always seems like the servers with more level-headed, focused guilds get things done, while the drama mamas in the high schools and whatnot will hold a server back in terms of progression. And in the case of this happy reunion with some former guildmates from all the way back in Burning Crusade, what I didn't tell them is that I still remember why our original guild broke up in BC. It was because of drama. Drama over PvE progression. We didn't have enough people to go from 10-man to 25-man raids. Zulaman, I don't think, was out yet. There were more progression-minded people in the guild who actually wanted to kick me out because I wasn't as hardcore as they were. And yet at the same time, they were upset with the leadership, and they wanted a better raiding guild because they wanted to get further through the Burning Crusade raiding scene and stuff like that. And so we ultimately wound up trying to get into a guild alliance with another guild who actually wanted to take us over, and it was a mess at the negotiating table and stuff like that. It was a disaster. It was a disaster. Eventually, some of the big raider types left the guild, and then eventually this guild master who was like, "Hey, how you doing?" a couple of days ago, got frustrated and just disbanded the entire guild. And we all went our separate ways. Drama Straza at its finest, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, over on Storm Rage, there were more players, there were bigger, more established, more progressed guilds with fancy Latin names like Ante Meridium and Militis Justica. It just seemed like overall a far more mature place to play than Alexstrasza was at the time, and so I server transferred off. Plus, there was Kosaga, the infamous Shakadin, making his PvP videos at the time of him blowing up Horde in Battlegrounds with 3,000 damage holy shocks and stuff, because he actually worked with his guildmates to jack his spell damage through the roof. So, big inspiration to folks playing Paladins during the emasculation era that was the first chunk of WoW's existence before Lich King fixed Ret. So it was the bigger, more hustly-bustly server with more going on and more progression and more people that had a better attitude of what it was they were doing, or the high school server that I started on exclusively because Blizzard had it tagged as a new players server when I started playing in 2006. Yeah, no comparison right there. That's not to say that Storm Rage didn't bring some bad experiences to the table as well, but we'll get to that a little later on. Let's talk about the Reunion Guild and why I left specifically. So I switched from Classic over to Retail and just goof around while running census surveys to see if the numbers ever get out of the hundreds when it comes to total players detected, because my Classic server is at nearly 10,000 players during the times that I play, between the various time periods and whatnot, afternoon, evening, into the night. So I go back and eventually, I was goofing around in Retail. People blow up in my face in the green chat. Shame, shame, demote, demote, shame, shame, demote, demote. And eventually it settles down because I'm not the only one who doesn't totally hate Retail. And eventually it simmers down. So later on I decide to just see what happens if I bring that up again. So I casually mentioned that changing the mob AI would help to fix Retail. Everybody blows up again. All the same people that caused the drama before were causing it again. So we have a sizable clique of people who are loose cannons. And remember, we're leveling right now. If this is the way they are when we're just leveling, getting up to 60 for the first time, what's it going to be like in dungeons and what's it going to be like in raids? And that's where the demographics question comes into play here. Demographics are about who do you want on your team and who you don't want on your team? Or what do you want on your team and what don't you want on your team? Unlike during our Drama Straza days, as my former guildmaster very quickly found out, I don't put up with nonsense. These are games. They're supposed to be fun. If people want to start drama in these video games, they will do so without me. Period. I bid them adieu. Got some confusing whispers after I G-quit. Why did you leave? And then he's like, hey man, it seemed like they were joking. Yeah, right. This is the experience now when we're leveling. I don't even want to know what they're going to be like when they're trying to raid. I also checked the class of the most rambunctious of them. Yup, Warrior. If people want to bring back the worst of the battle days, then Warriors will absolutely crap on Paladins in the end game. Hey, you can heal. Be my heal bot. I want to do all the fighting. Hey, tank? What's that? I've had so much experience over the years with DPS warriors who just want to blow everything up and blame the healer if they get killed by any mobs or ads or whatever, or tank warriors with a serious chip on their shoulders. And that's why I have the Lich King screenshot as our picture for this podcast. Because one of the bad guilds that I was in on Storm Rage, and sadly I was in it with some good people that, I think we came from one guild or another guild, and eventually we went to this good guild afterwards. That was nice and peaceful and friendly and family-oriented, no drama, a bunch of folks, some of them had kids and they played the game with their kids and stuff like that. They were a great group of people. I still have some screenshots of some of the dungeons and raids I ran with them. Incredible people. But before we got to that, I had to put up with some serious jackasses in the last guild we were in. And that included a stuck-up to high heaven protection warrior who absolutely refused to believe that paladins were gaining ground in the tanking arena or that death knights were even competent tanks in the first place. I've mentioned high schools earlier in this discussion. I'm doing that satirically to talk about teenage drama or teenage style drama or high school drama, cliques, gossip, garbage like that you don't expect from mature adults who actually grew up. But sadly, it's still present in these games in various places, if you're playing with the wrong people, of course. Well, let's just say that although I have left guilds before because of people starting a lot of drama who are absurdly immature teenagers, I've also left guilds because of people starting drama who were absurdly immature, not teenagers. And this guild with the jackass protection warrior was one of them. When you hear people, and him and his wife both played, and they were both total jackasses to people. Just to give you an idea, you know leet speak and fail speak and that emo talk and whatnot that was popular in the 2000s? When you hear people in their 40s and 50s doing that, yeah, that's when you know that something's wrong. This guy was always a jackass on the voice chat. It was one of those Ventrilo guilds where you joined the guild and half the time you were talking to people on the headset, so you actually had to sign off of the voice chat server and potentially put up with some comments in the guild chat or whatever, just so you could concentrate on key story moments of the game. But this guy was always a jackass. He was always right, everybody else was always wrong, and protection warriors were always the best tanks. It's probably a good thing that I had left this guild by the time that Icecrown Citadel came out, because I can only imagine what this jackass was doing in Halls of Reflection when warriors were at a very, very big disadvantage versus paladins, to the point where warriors were screeching and hollering for more AoE abilities on the forums because they were getting instantly kicked out of groups for things like heroic Halls of Reflection, because they'd go in and the group would be like, oh crap, another warrior, kick him, we want a pally. This guy was the exact opposite. He never pulled his head or his ass, dare I say, out of Classic or Vanilla, whatever you want to use for it now that Classic is out. He was 100% stuck in that vintage meta of World of Warcraft that only warriors should tank. Bear druids? No. Protection paladins? No. Death knights of any spec? Because death knights could tank in all three specs back then? No. And it is true that sometimes this guy had some serious sarcasm or satire going on with his humor. He was very heavily sarcastic. But at some point, you gotta stop joking and get serious. And it would get serious whenever this guy started getting upset in dungeons and raids, or even heroics for that matter. He would always be the one starting the drama in the voice chat the minute things started going wrong. And this is somebody who was in his 40s or 50s or something. He sounded old. And yet, as far as I'm concerned, his brain might as well have frozen at age 17 or something. And he wasn't like somebody living in his parents' basement or anything. He actually had a job he was playing the game with his wife, and he had a house and stuff like that. He had a good paying job too. But he just was always causing drama. And he was always the one who got emotional whenever things went wrong. And oftentimes took down the whole team's attempts on some boss or something because he was the one throwing the fit. And he was usually the tank. So when he wasn't playing well, the whole team wasn't playing well. Ultimately, I wound up leaving, needless to say. And not long afterwards, there was some huge meltdown in the guild, and a lot of the friends that came into that guild with me also left. And we all wound up in a much better guild that had zero drama, zero jackasses, and actually acknowledged that the times were changing and let prop pallies tank. Dungeon Finder was coming out too, so we always owned the randoms because we had a lot of people that were healers as well. So I would just go prot, and I would tank, or somebody else would tank and someone would heal and I'd be ret or something like that. But we had all kinds of fun in the early days of Dungeon Finder because the tanks and healers usually knew each other. Great experience, no drama. We got a heck of a lot more done. We cleared Naxx 10 and 25 and got an Ulduar. We cleared the Crusaders Coliseum, and I think we were running Icecrown groups at the time, but I think the guild ultimately had a lot of people lose interest, so we lost our core raiding team. And ultimately, when we fell below critical mass, we were just doing some stuff in the outdoor world and maybe some dungeons and stuff. We just didn't have the numbers to really field a raiding team for stuff later on. Plus, I think the guildmaster and a bunch of other high officers in the guild and folks that could actually help recruit all went inactive to go play other games, even though it was Lich King. So I just don't remember me leaving that guild for any drama-related reasons whatsoever. I think they just went inactive. The other one, on the other hand, that I mentioned earlier with the Jackass Protection Warrior, nope, that was definitely due to drama, and I should have left earlier. So what kind of a lesson can this kind of incident teach us? Well, for one thing, as much as guild leadership needs to decide who they want on their team and who they don't, and kick out the people they don't as soon as possible before the good people leave, the reverse is also true. If you join a guild, you need to pay attention to what people are doing, and how they behave, and how they handle when things go wrong. And you need to ask yourself, are these kinds of people the kind of people that I want to do group content with? Or am I going to be one of those weirdos that's in a guild but still pugs all the time? Because those people exist. And usually the reasons why they're like that are not good ones. Like they're way outside the league of the guild in terms of progression and gear, or they just plain can't bring themselves to do anything with guildies. If I am in that position where I can't see myself doing group content with a lot of people in the guild, I'm not going to stick around, because what's the point of being in a guild at that point? This is doubly the case in Classic, where the Classic client, based on 2006, goes so far back there isn't even guild banks yet, much less guild perks or anything of that sort of thing. It is a very crude setup with next to no benefits, if any at all. I just can't think of any right now, or something like that, if you can't picture yourself running dungeons and raids with these people. And that was definitely the case with these people in Classic. I am not going to have any patience for people that are just going to be hating retail all the time, because how stupid do people really think Blizzard is? I mean, earlier on Twitter, I linked the Asmongold response to the Ian Hazzikostas discussion from June, before Classic came out. And it already sounded like Ian Hazzikostas wanted to backpedal on some of the not-so-popular changes in the game, finally, after all these years. Now, if the team goes through with it, I mean, I think he can only do so much. He has to get the team on board to actually make this happen. But if Blizzard's developers go through with it, and they start dialing things back, especially when they take into account the big number difference between Classic and BFA right now, if they do that, then I would actually not mind playing retail again. I also wouldn't mind playing Classic mode in retail, which mixes together the pre-Cataclysm Azeroth with modern features like looking for dungeon and the transmog system and the new character models and stuff like that. I still think that's something Blizzard's gotta be working on at this point. They've gone to all the trouble to get patch 112, as it were, working with a semi-modern client by removing all the modern stuff and getting it to play nice with the data from all those years ago. I can't imagine that there isn't at least somebody there who's talking about bringing in some kind of Classic mode for people that want the experience but with all the modern amenities. It's gotta be on the table somewhere in Blizzard. I'll be very surprised if it's not. But I think that even if every single person that I've ever been in a guild with all throughout the years in World of Warcraft suddenly showed up on my server and we wound up in the same guild together, they'd find out very quickly that, number one, people can change over the span of years. Number two, the MMO landscape has changed. We live in a day and age nowadays where socialization and forced socialization is a giant question mark as to whether it can happen, because we've got ESO out there taking player freedom to unmatched heights with how it's viewed today as a competitor to WoW. Classic gets a few things right, and it introduces a couple of old ideas that are still valid nowadays, like increased world difficulty and feeling like there's a sense of danger when you're out in the world until you get amazing gear to be able to just trample on anything the outdoor world can throw at you. But the thing is, much like I discussed years ago in some of my podcast appearances and whatnot on Out of Continues, the world of MMOs is changing. It's no longer World of Warcraft and everybody chasing after it. You play games based on what story you like, what game design you like, how much player freedom you want, what the IP is. Lots of other reasons besides how much or how little a game copies WoW. The world has changed. Even if Classic is a throwback, it's not going to be the same throwback to everybody. In the case of myself versus the people persistently spewing venom at modern WoW in Classic's chat channels, and now, from what I've seen, guild chat, that is most definitely the case. It's not the same throwback for me as it is for these people that just can't do anything else except hate on retail all day. It makes me wonder if they're even enjoying the game. Yes, there's some things that Blizzard could do to fix the current game, but do we really think that Blizzard is going to continue sticking their head in the sand with the massive number, player, and enthusiasm difference between the two games right now, even if people start realizing that the old game has some issues and they start dropping off later on? What Blizzard should learn from this is that if they provide something good, people will like it and they will play it. Now imagine if they tuned up the current WoW game to be the best of all worlds. So the people that start playing Classic but get a little burnt out on some of the more older game mechanics and stuff can go over to the retail game and not have this problem and still be entertained greatly for years to come, including in future content releases. These are all questions and what-ifs that Blizzard needs to answer, and soon. As for now, WoW Classic remains a curiosity for me, and little else. I don't really tolerate WoW drama anywhere anymore, because I've experienced MMO environments like Guild Wars 2 and ESO, where WoW drama isn't a thing. And the people act so differently that it's a bit of a shock to the system to run into nice people in dungeons and raids or guilds in those other games. I don't have to put up with any vintage WoW drama nonsense, and I'm not going to. This is Multimedia J, signing off. Thanks for listening, and good night.